Can you imagine if 6 to 8 months ago someone had told you that the new version of pain play was sticking a nasal swab up your nose? I'm Iman Hariri-Kia. I'm Bustle's Sex and Relationships Editor, and today I'm going to be answering all of your sex-related questions without an ounce of shame. BDSM is basically the most popular kink in the cultural zeitgeist. You have the entire 50 Shades franchise, the sequel to 50 Shades of Grey, and the third one that I didn't see. You might be thinking, should I experiment with BDSM? Should I buy a whip, buy some chains? Should I build myself a dungeon in my 400 square foot apartment? And these are all valid questions. So I asked Danielle Blunt, professional dominatrix, to enlighten us on the subject.
BDSM is an acronym for bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, and sadomasochism. BDSM is about learning how to ask for what you want and getting it, or not getting it if that's what you're into. BDSM is an opportunity for play to explore parts of ourselves that we're told by society that we're not supposed to. It gives us a chance to really feel the edges of ourselves, as well as rewriting narratives and subverting power dynamics and really getting to embody our desires.
Rewriting narratives, subverting power dynamics, asking for what you want and actually getting it. I fucking love the sound of this. And since it all boils down to open and honest communication, discussing consent is highly important.
I think that a lot of BDSM practitioners practice negotiating consent in a way that the general population doesn't have the chance to engage in. In a lot of heteronormative vanilla sex, things are just taken as a given rather than figuring out where your desire fits into what you've seen on TV.
Okay, so I'm absolutely ready to engage and negotiate and explore, but I'm not so sure where to get started.
Education and community, I think, are really important. You can find like local munches as well as like community who's nearby. Following doms and kinky stuff on Twitter is really fun. People are really sharing a lot of themselves and might make you feel like, oh, I want that, or like, oh, I definitely do not want that at all.
Once you've started to educate yourself and you've found your community, where can you go to start to find what might work well for you?
For me, it's still that self-awareness of like what makes you feel submissive, what makes you feel dominant, what makes you step into this headspace of exploring these different archetypes or potentially bringing someone or yourself into an altered state. One little exercise that I think is really interesting to do with a partner is just having the submissive partner get on their knees and looking up at the person who's taking on the dominant role and just seeing how that physical height differential can really change the power dynamics.
Is this something you can explore when you're single?
For single people who are interested in exploring BDSM, I think having community is, again, really important. In non-COVID times, play parties are a really great way to meet folks. Just because you're single doesn't mean that you can't explore BDSM. It's also something that I think you can explore with yourself, creating a ritual of pleasure and pain. Masturbation, I think, can be a really fun way of figuring out and using your imagination and crafting a scene or writing erotic fiction to like really figure out what gets you off will make you. I love naturally.
Okay, I love the sound of this, but are people really going to sex dungeons in the middle of a global pandemic? How can you explore kink in the middle of coronavirus?
There's a lot that you can do right now. I've actually been having a lot of people contact me for virtual sessions to talk about their personal kinks. And a lot of them have told me that they wouldn't have previously booked a session with me, but it seemed like a really low barrier to entry to get to have a conversation about kink. I think people are spending a lot of time alone with themselves and with their thoughts, with their desires, and it's very hard to ignore if you've been repressing a certain aspect of your sexuality. Now is a really great time to find community, to read more about BDSM, to do research, and to find people to talk about your shared interests with.
And if all of this feels like a lot to you, or you just feel awkward reaching out to a community, don't worry, there are options.
For anyone interested in exploring kink, seeing a pro dom is a great idea, or a professional submissive. I've hired a pro before, and it was a great experience, and also I now have so much more empathy for how awkward some people feel when they're entering that situation. I wanted a specific experience, so I hired a professional. Also, I really value personally having a kink-friendly therapist. I think that that's a really helpful tool. I know that not everyone has access to competent mental health care, which is a totally different problem, but that in community, being able to have conversations and learn from other people's experiences and to really like take that time to reflect, to journal about like what feels good and what doesn't, and being able to communicate with your partner.
BDSM is basically all about exploring your sexual desires and boundaries with no shame. Imagine if you could take that mentality of experimenting with yourself and being open to trying new things and applied it to the rest of your life.
It's also just like really empowering to be like, this is what I want. This is an experience that I can have, and there's like a structure for me to get it.
Asking for what you really want without any shame. Can you imagine? I can, because this is No Shame Sex Ed with Iman Hariri-Kia. Like and subscribe to No Shame Sex Ed, and then I can pop up with custom sex advice in your notifications and you won't have to do anything. I am so great like that.